Good morning, folks. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I'm your host, Tiffany Daniels, and we're going back to that horrible world known as the JRC. But before we do, the usual disclaimers and, my usual ranting. So this came in, at least sort of came in a few days ago. I just got the news last night when I was on live stream. You can kind of see the title here, which seems like it's just covering the special ed and disability programs. That's fantastic because, as I have stated numerous times, as far as being one of the programs in this country that has extremely limited funds, is notoriously underfunded, Congress is giving a boost to special ed and disability programs. But why I'm bringing it up on this channel, even though, yes, I would be covering this anyways for obvious reasons, there is a provision, a part of that bill. Remember when I told you towards the end of the JD versus AH trial about that bill that we were trying to get passed through Congress, which amongst other things was going to attack in regards to the Judge Rotenberg Center and how they torture disabled students? Well, what we're about to read this morning is an update on that very exact bill. Okay? So we got quite the scoop this morning. So before we get going, the usual disclaimers. But before I do, and I addressed this a little bit last night and I went on a rant on it. I'm sorry. Got a wee bit angry. I kind of always do when it comes to my neurodiverse folks and fellows. I can't really help myself on that. But to address it again before we get into things, I've seen both sides of the argument when it comes to ADHD and Adderall, okay? I've seen it all. On one hand, yes, I live in reality, okay? There was such thing in the 90s as, I call it, trend diagnosing. I know this because I am one of the individuals who was incorrectly diagnosed with ADD back in that time period, put on Ritalin, then later Adderall, and kept on Adderall even after that diagnosis had been overturned and the correct one had been applied to me. Medicine can be a double-edged sword. And what I mean by that is, does Ritalin and Adderall help with focus? I can speak from experience, folks. Yes, it does. Okay? It absolutely 100% does. However, there are drawbacks because it is an amphetamine. Okay? Which affects neurodiverse brains a lot differently than your typical person out on the street, but it has its drawbacks. The drawbacks that I experienced was severe weight loss. I spent the entirety of from middle school all the way to high school being dangerously underweight. And it took me over a decade to get to regular weight once I got off the medicine. Okay? There is some speculation on my part that due to me having taken the incorrect medication for that long, that it could have possibly been one of the things that has contributed to the constant spasms that I have in my legs. I'm not sure on that. There's been no doctor who's corroborated that. But so far, it's been the only thing to me that's made any sense. Granted, take that. There's been speculation for years, and I do mean years. Like, this is not a new argument at all. ADHD and ADD has been contested since its inception into the DSM back in the early 90s. Because who can tell the difference between a kid on a sugar high and someone with ADHD if you don't work in the field? That being said, as an individual who has actually worked in this field, I can tell you with my whole chest that ADHD very much does actually exist. I can also tell you with my full chest that yes, these meds do work as they are intended. There is side effects as there is with any medicine that you're going to take. That is a natural part of medicine. It is what it is. Okay? It is what it is. To sit there and try and tell me that the symptoms of ADHD is not coming because of a diagnosis, but because of addiction, it's bullshit, folks. I know some people come and they come to think this way with completely innocent intentions, but I'm here to tell you it is absolute, complete, utter garbage. I can tell you this as someone who's worked in a field because I've seen the difference between the ADHD person before the medicine and the ADHD person after the medicine. I can tell you, as someone who has witnessed this numerous times, both amongst my consumers, former roommates, classmates, and yes, even relatives with the diagnosis. Yeah, the symptoms are real. They are not a byproduct of addiction because those symptoms were there before they ever started to take the medicine. The distractions, the constant needing to run, the constant getting distracted while in the middle of doing something and moving on to something else and completely forgetting about the thing, all that is real. The sensory issues that they have that are very familiar and similar to their autistic counterparts, also very real. Many of these individuals almost have, let's just put it this way. They have extreme difficulty in being able to function without the meds. Okay? They can't get themselves regulated enough to be able to slow down so that they can get each of the things done that they need to get done. Many of these folks lose jobs because of this. Okay? All right? Because they get distracted and they can't help it. What Adderall and Ritalin's function is supposed to do is to assist with focus with these particular diagnoses. They are to assist you to go through each task one at a time. Yes, they are an amphetamine, but the way it affects the ADHD brain as opposed to the neurotypical brain is vastly different. Strangely enough, because we all know that true life is stranger than fiction, Adderall actually acts as almost a suppressant to the ADHD brain. It gives them the ability to slow down enough to focus on the moment at hand or the task at hand, as opposed to flying off in 5 different places at once. It does help with focus. It does help them actually slow down. You've got to remember, and there's been studies to prove this, I've seen them. There is vast differences between the ADHD brain and the neurotypical brain. There has actually been scans on the brain and studies that have been done. Okay? So, one set, I'm not going to tell you that some diagnoses don't get incorrectly done and done in mass. Because happened to me. Okay? Happened to me. Alright? I can tell you that. Am I going to sit there and tell you that there's not a price to these medicines? No, I'm not going to tell you that because that would make me a liar. Okay? What I'm also going to tell you to do is you can't throw out the baby with the bathwater. You got to know, you've got to understand that our brains, both physically and in the way we think, we operate, and how we handle excess energy is not the same as a neurotypical brain. The way an amphetamine may affect you is not going to be the same as how it's going to affect the brain of a person who has the diagnosis of ADHD. So please, neurotypicals, for the love of God, quit pushing onto us what said drug would do to the neurotypical brain. Because, as I've said many times on this channel, we're not the same. Our brains, our neurology is not the same. Our neurology is even not the same from when we compare against one another. The autistic brain still has differences from the ADHD brain. Please understand this before you start spouting pseudoscience, particularly from discredited doctors who've lost their licenses. One doctor's opinion as opposed to years and years and years of medicine. Please remember, not just in the JD versus AH or even Manson versus Wood. Please remember, what you do for them, please do for us. Take things into context here. Actually dig in before forming an opinion. I don't care if you have an opposing opinion. You're allowed that. But do not gaslight the people who have the diagnosis. And if you're going to come at this subject, make sure you're doing your full homework. Don't just read one side of things. And don't discredit everything that we say but we know these drugs do this, because again, we're not built the same. Now, to the disclaimers, and then we're going to get into the breaking news. In the description box, you're going to find the link to the article that the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center doesn't want you to read. It is written by NeuroClastic, a small non-for-profit started by Autistics for Autistics, wherein they interviewed and surveyed over 900 ABA professionals in regards to the JRC's quote-unquote behavioral modification program. Matter of fact, the JRC doesn't want you to read this article so much they have threatened NeuroClastic with a defamation lawsuit if they did not remove it from the website. NeuroClastic has refused. So you know the drill, folks. Please read the article and don't forget to share on all your social media. We got the pertinent links to the... brain. Can't brain. It's morning. We also have NeuroClastic's public statements in regards to the defamation lawsuit threat, as well as a link to their GoFundMe. We are crowdfunding, folks, in case the JRC actually has the balls to see through with their threat. We got the pertinent links to the Agape boarding school situation as well. Agape Boarding School is a Christian-themed boarding school based out of Stockton, Missouri that takes in so-called troubled male teens that has, and pending, over 21 civil lawsuits, claims, and allegations leveled against it. These claims, allegations, and all the civil lawsuits include, and remember folks, this has been substantiated by the Missouri Department of Social Services, and the hard evidence ER documents, you name it, they've got it. This includes sodomy, rape, sexual assault, child abuse, psychological and emotional abuse, child trafficking, starvation, and that's just for starters. You have one former staff member arrested by the FBI, another a doctor still on the premises with full access to the boys up on multiple substantiated claims of rape, sodomy, and sexual assault of the boys there. You've got a brand new attorney general who still, to this date, has done nothing, absolutely fucking nothing in regards to the boys at that school. And we've got a governor hyped up on a power trip from hell. So please read those articles. Don't forget to share and sign the change.org Shut Agape Boarding School Down petition. We got the pertinent links for the topic at hand, the Stop the Shocks campaign as well, including Autistic Hoya's massive archive on the subject, Jennifer Masumba's behavioral sheet of shockable offenses, A clip out of the 7-hour ordeal undergone by Andre McCollins back in 2002. The templates and the ever-present self-explanatory change.org shut the Judge Rotenberg Center down petition. When we discuss the JRC, folks, you're going to hear vivid descriptions of and catch clips of surveillance footage of people with disabilities being tortured and abused. If you got young children present, please go ahead and use your headphones, all right? This channel is marked not for children for a reason. We use profanity and we talk about dark subjects. If your child is 16 and younger and watching this channel, parental supervision is very obviously advised, all right? All right, now to today's news. Let's move forward here. So this is written by Michelle Diamit. This came out a few days ago, so very pertinent. A newly approved $1.7 trillion federal spending bill will bring more funding for special education while expanding access to ABLE accounts and addressing the use of electric shock on people with disabilities. The legislation, which funds the government through September, was signed by President Joe Biden just before the start of the new year. It includes over $15 billion for special education. Thank you! $904 million jump over last year, and extends Money Follows the Person, a Medicaid program that helps people with disabilities move to from institutions to community-based living through September 2027. Thank you! By the way, speaking of underfunded, this particular one has been around for at least a good couple of decades. This idea of integration. In fact, I was a big part of the push out here in my part of Missouri to get those who had been previously in Missouri institutions integrated into the group homes and day programs throughout the state. I was also a part of assisting in helping individuals qualify to be able to go to places like where I used to live and when I was in assisted living when I first got out of high school, places like Crowhaven. There's places like Sassafras out here where I live now. This kind of money can make sure that more of these programs can pop up. I hope it does, because what I love about places like Crowhaven and Sassafras, what makes them absolutely unique, is that they are a model that is based on this. Each person has their own individualized apartment, okay? You pay rent just like everybody else on the outside world there. You have access to staff when you need it. Hey, reasonable accommodations, right? That help also to assist with whatever life skills you need to learn while in that particular type of program. They usually, for me, they came over about once a week. It's brilliant, folks, and we need a lot more places like them out there, because having staff there, but also fighting to help these folks get into independent living to become a part of their communities instead of being sequestered off is going to do infinitely more good than harm. But that goes besides our subject. I know that initiative like backwards, forwards, and sideways. Moving forward here. In addition, the measure increases the eligibility age for ABLE accounts. Now this, folks, is a special savings vehicle. It allows people with disabilities a way to save money without jeopardizing their government benefits. This particular has been huge, folks, since 2014. Because for years and years and years and years, with social, like SSDI was what I was on years and years ago. And you were only to have a certain amount in your bank account. You weren't able to save money, because if you gone over that limit, they would then start taking money out of your account. I know this because it put me in the red several times, folks. And yeah, it doesn't encourage anyone with a disability who's on it to live a normal life. Basically, it was a way to keep us beneath the poverty line for life. So these accounts are a way that we are able to put money back without getting penalized for it and having the government then snatch it out of our bank accounts. See where I'm going here? Now let me read more on this. Since the accounts were established under the 2014 law, they have been limited to individuals with disabilities at onset prior to age 26. That was what we've been fighting for years, by the way, to get that expanded. With the change, eligibility will expand starting in 2026 to include anyone with disabilities that present by age of 46. The higher age limit, which is expected to make an additional 6.2 million people eligible, had been long sought by the disability advocates and others in order to broaden access and increase the number of ABLE accounts open to help ensure the program is sustainable. Separately, the spending bill creates a path for the Food and Drug Administration. Listen, this is where it's pertinent to us. Okay? To ban what are known as the electrical stimulation devices, or the GED. Folks, this is what we're talking about. This is directly attacking on the grounds of what got the ban overturned back in 2021. The devices send shocks through electrodes attached to skin in order to condition people not to engage in self-injurious or aggressive behaviors. They are known to be used at only one facility in the U.S., the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center in Canton, Massachusetts. Massachusetts! I cannot brain today, folks. Which serves children and adults with developmental disabilities as well as those with behavioral and emotional problems. Again, as I say every time, I'm going to make a few points on this. First off, we all know that they don't just use the devices for what they say that they do when they're defending themselves. We know for a fact that they will use the GED for any goddamn reason and use vague-ass excuses as to why they did. And as long as they dot their I's and cross their T's, no one in Massachusetts bats an eye at it. They're doctors. It's this idea that doctors should be untouchable that I just want to destroy, like with a 9-iron. May have to borrow my uncle's. My point is, they don't even use the devices the way they like to defend themselves when they come under fire for this. They use it for any excuse that they can, and they lie about how often that they use it. Also, as usual, the other things that they get up to in that school are still not being addressed. But we'll get to that towards the end of this video here. For years, advocates have pushed to end the practice, and in 2020, the FDA finalized a ban on electrical stimulation devices, citing an unreasonable and substantial risk of illness or injury. But the regulation was overturned when the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit Court determined that the agency had overstepped its authority. Now, with the new legislation, Congress has clarified that the FDA has the right to institute such a ban. This opens the door for the FDA to pass another ban without fear that will be struck down on the same ground, said Zoe Gross, Director of Advocacy at the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, who called the development a step forward. Notably, however, Congress did not elect to increase asset limits for supplemental security income recipients within the government funding measure, despite a long bipartisan push. This is what I'm talking about when I say they like to keep us beneath the poverty line. The particular threat is if a person tries to advance and they find a career in which, in spite of their disability, they're still able to handle themselves. I used to receive threats, folks, literal threats, that if I dared go full-time instead of part-time and doing menial labor work, that I could lose my benefits. At the time, my Medicaid was covering my staff. It was covering my team of doctors. It was covering my medicine. My SSI was helping me cover my rent and food. You see where I'm going here. However, I was still made to live beneath the poverty line. And had I lived in anywhere other than assisted living at the time, I wouldn't have been able to make it. Not everybody has government housing. You can see how back then, the height of how much I was allowed to have was at $675 a month. Now, let's compare that to right now. I am in an apartment where I pay $756 a month just for rent. You can see how much this would not help in the real world. Yes? Good, I'm glad you do. Currently, individual SSI beneficiaries can have no more than $2,000 in assets at any given time under limits that have been remained static for decades. And here's the thing, folks, I wasn't even allowed to have 2,000. It depends on what kind of benefits you were on. If it's SSI, it's 2,000. If you were on SSDI, the height was, at least last time when I was on it, $675. This is not livable wages, folks. Not for anybody who can rub two brain cells together, especially now when we're living in inflation times. If you think you're getting impacted, think about the people who live on these type of benefits for a second. Just saying. It's very disappointing that Congress didn't take the opportunity to help lift people with disabilities out of poverty by simply bringing the SSI asset limit out of the 1980s into this century. Thank you, Peter Burns, CEO of the ARC. Oh my God, Peter! I know of him through Mike Powers, who runs ARC out here, who I've worked with before, so... Peter Burns is good people, folks. Peter Burns is good people. We will continue to push for this change in the new year. All right, so that's quite a bit of news, a lot of good news. But I can't help it. I'm a wee bit of a nihilist. So my take on all of this is this. We've got some serious actual funding looking like it's going to boost our special ed programs, which we've only been waiting for decades. We have more of a push to help integrate folks from institutionalization into living out in community and becoming a part of the community, which is good. That is the same push that has been going on for decades now. It has been a slow trickle that's been done over time. It's literally been slower than a snail's pace. So hopefully this funding will help speed this process up a little bit. Hopefully the extra funding with special ed will be able to assist in getting more, more stout, decent transition services up for kids in high school. One could hope, right? One could only hope. Just saying. And now Congress has said, in opposition to what the Supreme Court, the D.C. Circuit Court said, the FDA, as I stated previously when this first got overturned, absolutely does have the authority to ban the FDA device. We do not know anything as of right now as to when they intend to reinstitute the ban. But here's why I'm skeptical, folks. I hate to be this person, but I've seen this song and dance before. I've seen it multiple times. I have been fighting this for over a decade. And what I've noticed after all of this time is that the JRC always finds a way to wiggle around and worm itself out. They're like the insidious cancer that you can win for a minute after using chemo, but then will find its way back in. It also doesn't address the other fucking insane, torturous things that I get up to in that school, which hasn't been addressed by a whole lot of folks. The bizarre behavioral rehearsal lessons, the batshit insane food contingency programs, the sleep deprivation, folks. It's not even subpar. Their educational thing is just complete, absolute garbage and does not in any way help these kids to be able to get a high school diploma. None of these have been addressed yet. Just because you take away one device does not mean they do not have their other means in order to torture the students there. There's only one answer when it comes to the JRC. They have to be shut down. It's the only answer. Because we've seen this song and dance before. We saw it in 2020, and then we saw what happened in 2021. These folks are slippery bastards who have managed to weasel their way out of more lawsuits and bullshit than I care to mention at this point. You've had people fighting myself over a decade. You've had other individuals who've been fighting them for over 3 fucking decades. They always manage to get themselves out of it. Just because one avenue is closed does not mean the JRC is not going to use another. And considering the state of our Supreme Court these days, I just don't have a whole lot of faith in it. Now, I'm going to celebrate that this did get past Congress, finally, okay? I am going to absolutely celebrate that. But I gotta be on the realistic side of things. I've seen this song and dance before. To me, there is only one real answer. If we want this to stop, they have to be held to account. Okay? They are doing criminal acts of violence against these kids every single day. Every single day. And they continue to get away with it because they call it medicine. Taking away one aspect of the other various types of torture that these kids are forced to endure is not good enough. It can be easily overturned with a person with enough money and enough influence and enough greasing as many hands as possible, as JRC has proved in the past. We have to take the rug out from under them. It's the only answer that actually provides that these kids will no longer be tortured and abused with impunity. Okay? This has been going on since the 70s now. So, celebrate the victory. Absolutely celebrate this victory. Do so. Absolutely. I'm right there with you on that. However, keep in mind how slippery of bastards the JRC and their fucking lawyers are. Remember how batshit insane Mr. Dr. Matthew Israel, I'll use my own studies as a means to show that, his version of the fucking truth. These are the people we're dealing with, and we're fighting against true believers with enough money in their pockets to be dangerous, okay? Keep on these people. Keep on your senators. Keep on all of them. Push for a federal investigation into the JRC. That's my answer. There are crimes against humanity that are being committed in that school every single day. It needs to be investigated. It doesn't just need to be banned, it needs to be investigated. And the perpetrators belong behind bars. They do not belong within a centimeter of a living thing, because I wouldn't even trust these bastards with a snail or a cockroach. So yay, we've got to step forward after taking 5 back. Let's hope I'm wrong. Let's hope this is the first step, the beginning of the downfall of this place of horrors that should have gone the way of the dodo a long time ago. Let's go ahead and close out on that. We don't get very many views on this channel. The few that we do tend to get removed from time to time. So please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe. Don't forget to hit the comments. I am going to include the link to this article in the description box in case you want to read over it yourself. As always here, folks, we here at Spilling Tea hope you have a good one. I'm going to be doing a little bit of front loading today, and then I get to help clean out the back room so I can outplace the new TV. Okay, I got to vent about this before we close out. It's huge. I mean, I knew it was huge, but it's like half the size of my freaking living room wall. There's no way I'm going to be able to fit it in here and be able to rearrange everything without having a meltdown of some sorts. So it's going into the back bedroom so that Roomy Paul can have it. And then I'm going to get a badass TV that will actually sit out here come tax time. and put the one back in that room into the exercise room. It's monstrous big, folks. Monstrous big. I had no idea. So I get to do that later. So I'm going to cut this short. As always, we hope you have a good one. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.